It's that time again, unless you want to listen to this later because it's not live. Welcome to Vaguely Scientific.
That's so true.
I am Derek, the host of the show, but I can't do it alone, so here with the assist, please say hello to Jim, the scientist. Hi, Jim.
I'm like the person who jumps when they do the alley-oop in the basketball thing.
Yeah.
Spoken like
sports.
a true scientist.
Yeah.
And to get back on track, we're happy to bring back our guest this week, Dak. How are you, Dak?
Oh, man, I am doing just so well. I'm so excited about these topics that I have clearly done so much research on. This is going to be articulate and accurate.
I just assume you're inherently knowledgeable about these things.
Yeah.
What are the topics again? No, never mind.
Well, this
Let it
is
be a surprise.
This is a show where we answer the most ridiculous audience-submitted questions in a manner that we like to call vaguely scientific. But before we get into those mystery topics, it's time for Jim's fun science fact of the day. Jim?
All right. The Gulf Stream is a warm water ocean current that originates off the coast of Florida and works its way up the east coast of the United States, crosses over to Western Europe. And what's really cool about the Gulf Stream is that the warm water in that current is responsible for the comparatively mild climates that areas near it actually receive. So if you look at like the west coast of England, for example, it's a lot warmer than the east coast, and parts of like Scandinavia are a little bit warmer as well. So it does really important work, that Gulf Stream.
It's good.
Wow.
For the Gulf Stream. I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
That's more information than I learned from high school, at least, so.
Yeah, in our Gulf Stream class, you know.
So before we actually tackle our first topic for this episode, we do have some housekeeping, and that is why right now we're going to do that segment we like to call Stuff We Got Wrong and Actually Bothered to Look Up Later. In our previous episode, Jim stated that the vacuum of space has, quote, something like 1 atom per cubic meter, end quote. In fact, the vacuum of space varies in density, just like a lot of things. Areas in our solar system can have 100,000 atoms per cubic meter, while deep interstellar voids can have as few as 1 to 10 atoms per cubic meter. I still, however, argue that if it has any atoms of matter, that it's not space, because space means empty.
I'm
gonna die on this hill, Jim.
All right, well, I'll make sure that you freeze to death in a dignified position.
So why don't we move on to our first question?
Yeah.
What do we got?
Yeah. What we got is a question from Jonathan. When programming self-driving cars with regard to what to do in emergencies and accidents, are we teaching them who is more valuable? What if a self-driving car has to choose between hitting one person or a group of people? What does it do?
The trolley problem.
I was just going to say, I have not gotten a chance to play Trial by Trolley because the pandemic started right as my Kickstarter came in.
Oh.
Is this is this a video game or a board game?
Oh, yeah, it's a board game by the people who made Cyanide and Happiness, and it's just the trolley problem, and you argue over which side of the trolley tracks you should drive down.
So I think that the way that the automotive industry should actually solve this problem is just by playing that exact board game, and whatever the outcome is, that's just what we go with as a society.
They just have to run every scenario, and
In a similar note, robotic trolleys, just replacing all the vehicles on the road with robotic trolleys, you never have to worry about it again.
That's true.
Didn't we do that before?
Not that I know of, but I mean, I don't follow trolley law.
Yeah, I mean it's big in Europe, but it hasn't really made its way across the pond yet.
Yeah. It's got to follow the Gulf Stream back to Florida.
Oh,
see. So the question is how do the automotive manufacturers determine which scenario, or I guess which outcome for that scenario? Is that
yeah, I guess the question is, how do, like, the people who are programming them, how do they decide what a car will do in an accident?
I mean, that is like the $1 million question.
Yeah.
I think there isn't currently a unified answer, but it's got to be one of the most widely debated topics in self-driving vehicles, right?
Yeah. I was
sure it is.
reading a little bit about some of the sort of ethics that they are trying to implement. Because, I mean, right now, the main concept behind the programming is to hurt as few people as possible. But
Oh, okay.
how sophisticated that is, that is just like Dax said, you can only be as sophisticated as the programming that is currently available in these cars. So how much of that is like
True.
functional, I guess you could say, like, does it know the difference between two people and one person?
Well, the first thing that I thought of when I read this question was actually iRobot.
Okay.
Oh yeah, the Isaac Asimov rules.
Yeah, and I'm most familiar with the adaptation of that story, which was the movie with Will Smith.
Well, I mean, of course.
The premise for his character in that movie, I remember, he is distrustful of machines and artificial intelligence because he was in a car crash in which a robot saved his life when it could have saved the life of a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And they argued that he had a better probability of surviving, and he said they should have prioritized the little girl over him.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not as familiar with the original book, otherwise I would speak to that.
Mm-hmm. I actually haven't read the original book, but I mean, you're right about one of the things I was reading was that a robot, or I guess you could say a self-driving car, the software is going to be very, very logic based. So it would theoretically, and I don't think it's sophisticated enough to do these kinds of calculations yet, but it might try to calculate like, oh, well, if I hit this person in just this way, then they are less likely to die. I might break their leg, but they are less likely to die than if I veer this way and hit this person head on or something like that. One thing I know they are relatively sophisticated about is figuring out how much space to leave for traffic and oncoming lanes versus, like if you're trying to go around a bicyclist or something. I shouldn't say they're like immensely sophisticated, but it's something that they are actively working on because cycling, of course, is kind of dangerous, if you're a cyclist on the road.
Well, that makes sense. I was, this is based on ignorance, I'll admit that, but I would think that as far as sophistication of self-driving cars, I know that they're mostly responding to the environment. So I would imagine that kind of there's not really a I guess protocol for a lot of things. Like if somebody hits a self-driving car, I imagine it can't really do anything about that. And if it encounters a wreck, its first reaction is going to be to stop or to try to find another route. So like if two self-driving cars are in a wreck, it seems like they've already messed up.
True.
That feels like the intro to a joke. So two self-driving cars. But, Jim, I think you bring up a really interesting point, and that's sort of like the technological aspect of this, because while I don't think we have, maybe the compute power right now to discern, if I hit this person in this particular way, this is the outcome. I doubt that we have that available to us at the moment, but there's no reason to believe that we wouldn't have that type of data analysis in real time, 10 years from now. And in fact, actually, I think it was back in 2014, there was I want to say like a representative from Google who was discussing self-driving cars and the software in its current state. So this would have been, again, like 2014, 2015. And somebody had asked that question, and the answer, quite candidly, was, at present, the car is going to choose the smaller of the two objects, if it has to make that choice. And I mean, that's probably, maybe that's the plot line of iRobot, right? Because the smaller of two objects is going to be, the baby in the carriage versus, the giant dude. So
that would be like protecting, like minimal damage to the car and the passengers of the car, right?
Yeah, but I'm not even sure if the thought process goes that deep, because this is really where I think the issue gets super complex, because the more variables and the more questions you ask about this, and, the more you consider it, the more this becomes an ethical dilemma. Right now with the, the Google answer of, oh, we're just hitting the smaller object. That's a very practical, sort of standpoint there, especially for the time and the technology that was available in 2014. But as we're able to, identify human beings in real time, their trajectory, all of these complex, physics aspects of the situation, how are programmers now going to deal with the increasing ethical dilemma of this problem?
Right. Mm-hmm. And that gets into, like, you can't make general rules for ethical questions because every situation is, like, super different.
Yeah. And car accidents and situations where you are, moving towards a pedestrian, for example, happen so quickly that even with the computing power of a car, it may not be able to make a decision fast enough that it can really affect the outcome, because it might be able to hit the brakes a split second faster than you. It might be able to turn the wheel a split second faster than you, but that's only one split second you get extra.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I'm not sure if I would phrase it as not making a decision, because it has to arrive somewhere, right? Yeah, there is programming. It's not going to blue screen of death your Tesla. I mean, I hope not. Well, even though that would be that would be just incredibly funny right before accidentally killing a group of 5 people. I feel like this is what Bill Gates has wanted all along. But in direct contrast to, let's say, a human who's put into that predicament, when they encounter a complex problem like that, their split second decision is based off of instinct, and and that is something that is not pre-calculated, whereas everything that this car is doing has to be programmed by someone or something.
So I think it's interesting that the first thing we said was the trolley problem, because, like, good trolley problem scenarios, there really isn't a correct answer to them. And so, like, everybody, like, this is going to be something I would think that would be voted on.
Oh gosh.
If we had the technology to be sophisticated enough, I feel like these are things that people would debate about.
I mean, this is inherently going to become some sort of political issue. I mean, I'm not looking forward to that day, but but it's interesting, I think, to think about this problem from the perspective of the auto manufacturers, because presumably their top priority is actually, well, I mean, I hope it would be global safety, but I feel like it is actually more safety to the shareholders, which in this case might look like, reducing the amount of culpability from those manufacturers,
Sure. Insurance companies and stuff would definitely have something to say about that.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because, let's say, if we're going back to the trolley problem, the whole basis of this is not a 5 versus 1, because obviously if that's the case, you want to minimize damage and you just go with the 1. It's that you have to do an additional action to kill the one person. You have to flip the switch yourself.
Right.
And so for auto manufacturers, I'm sure they don't want to have that decision placed on, I guess, an ethical construct that they themselves have created and abide by, because you can argue ethics, all day long. I almost feel like they would want to try and find a way that, this mathematically makes the most sense, which actually, so I remember watching, I think it was a TED Talk or something a while back that discussed this, and I believe the solution to this problem that this person presented was having like a machine learning model that is creating an AI that can determine what the best answer of this question is. And this is, kind of getting into, AI theory. But, if you take a look at, let's say, what's that? Jim, you probably know this. What's the famous AI that is, the world champion at Go now or whatever? I think Google owns it. Alpha something.
I forget its name. Dang it. I know exactly who you mean.
Yeah. It's like Alpha Zero. Is it Alpha Zero? It's Alpha Zero. That's it. It's Google DeepMind Alpha Zero. So, when they were figuring out the best possible way to play this game Go, which is this, obscenely complex game with a very simple rule structure, there were a couple different methods in which they used to train this AI. And the first one was, oh gosh, what do they call it? It's basically the method of this is what a human would do at the highest skill level. And so aspire, like, I'm going to feed you this data, tell you, here's what we would do in this scenario. And then over time, the AI learns to play essentially like that. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty common way of training an AI. Gosh, I really wish I remembered exactly what that was called, but we can call that essentially learned behavior that is being taught by, a human in this case. Yeah. And the flaw there, which is just entirely predictable, was that the AI never actually excelled beyond the peak human performance. In fact, the bell curve merely approached it. And so that didn't work because the whole goal for Alpha Zero with regards to Go was we wanted to beat the best human. Mm-hmm. And they did end up doing that. And the way that they did that was they changed their learning model from, essentially feeding it the right answers and training it on the right plays to make. And instead, it gave a very, very simple set of instructions. Almost like like a reward system, for a mouse trying to find cheese in a maze. Oh, it would basically say, okay, this is an outcome in the game Go that you want to aspire to. Now just run billions of simulations and keep perfecting yourself. And I'm grossly oversimplifying their process. Sure. But the idea is that they gave it a very simple, universally factual piece of information, which is, I don't know how to play Go, but I assume, it's, more pieces in your color, the better, right? And so
it's got a very complicated rule set. I have attempted to learn it a few times and I'm like, I know where to put pieces. I don't know how to make it good.
What I know about Go is that it's not strictly mathematical. There's like a lot of judgment calls involved in it.
And that's why it took so long for a computer to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, how could we tackle this trolley problem? Or I guess, more directly, the self-automating cars decision-making model. And let's say that there is a universal truth that we can all essentially agree upon. And let's say that's all human life or all sentient life is inherently valuable. Mm-hmm. And I think you could probably even further define that in a way that is universally agreed upon, such as, I don't know, maybe human life is more valuable than a turtle's life. Sorry to the turtles. I mean,
Mario
this is not something
like a word here.
Yeah, right. Man, so would Splinter. So what if we basically took that type of model where we're introducing one universally agreed upon fact and then training this AI in, this variety of situations and thought experiments, and then finding out, all right, what did you come up with? After, 10 months of training, where did you land, Mr. AI? And then And I could honestly, depending on what the actual end result is, I could absolutely see manufacturers saying, well, this is what the compute stated we should do, and so we're going to fall back on this. And in some ways, they're kind of escaping responsibility of, their ethical decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, that's translating people to numbers at that point.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up, I guess this isn't a major point, but it's just something I thought of. There is an Amazon Prime show called Upload by Greg Daniels, and it's like a futuristic society that deals with like virtual reality and stuff. And they have self-driving cars. And there's a scene in which this girl's sitting in a car with the main character, and she looks at the dashboard of the car and she says, "You don't have your car set to prioritize passenger?" And because apparently that's a thing you can toggle on and off in that scenario. So I wonder how much of that is a thing. Like,
and that's super interesting too. So there have been a lot of studies on how, like, what way self-driving cars should prioritize humanity. And a vast majority of the responses from, people who were surveyed said it should prioritize humanity as a whole. It should minimize death in all situations. So that means that if, you have to take the hit and it costs you your life, that's better than hitting the 5 people in the street or whatever.
Right.
And that, I think that was around a 90% agreed upon statement. But then the following question of, would you buy a self-driving car that operated under those principles? It was absolutely not. And as it turns out, the self-driving car that people would, be comfortable buying is the one that prioritizes protecting the passengers. And so, we're kind of at this societal stalemate. Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's like really interesting and somehow not surprising at all.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. Like, no one wants the car that's going to potentially kill them.
I mean, ideally, nobody should die because they should work well.
Yeah.
Well, I think overall, though, it is almost a flaw to be discussing this topic in such great detail, like across society, because it's a very hot button issue, with self-automation. But the simple fact is, regardless of exactly what that outcome is, self-driving automobiles are vastly, vastly more safe than human-driven automobiles.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean,
True.
it's outrageous, the statistics. And so the question to me is almost like, not how do we solve, this particular issue? It's how do we get everybody to stop talking about this so that we can just get these things on the road?
Yeah.
Well, it's like the statistics about flying in a plane versus every time there is a plane crash, everyone hears
right. Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I remember when I forget if it was, I think it might've been Uber. They had one accident after like 500,000 hours of driving. And I might be getting the numbers wrong, but the point is that after an inordinate amount of driving, they had one accident and they shelved the program. And I'm like, that's such a good number of accidents for that amount of time.
I like how you phrased that.
Like, I would have taken 3 or 4.
Yeah.
That's such a good number of accidents.
Like, I mean, I don't know how many hours I've driven in my life, of course, but I've been in I've been in one car accident that was me as a driver. It wasn't my fault, luckily, but like, over the course of my entire life, I think I've been in 3 car accidents total. And I mean, I would be very comfortable having a self-driving car. And I think I would be really comfortable having them on the road near me, just because if you look just at the numbers, they are way better.
Didn't we figure out that if more people were in self-driving cars, it would make each of the self-driving cars safer?
Yeah, because most of the accidents the self-driving cars have experienced have been because someone else wrecked into them.
Yeah, that makes
I mean,
sense.
it all boils down to human error.
Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
And cosmic radiation, of course. The cosmic rays that bit flip transistors.
You mean 5G?
Exactly. Just don't tell anybody.
That's so many G.
So I'm looking at some stats here, and it looks like in 2020 there were almost 39,000 motor vehicle deaths just in the U.S. And I forget exactly what the numbers were, but I want to say that it was something like, if there were full automation of motor vehicles, it would reduce fatalities. And this is actually within just the next few years or whatever. It would reduce fatalities by something like 94%.
Wow.
And which is
sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's astronomical. And I don't even think that's necessarily considering a technology that would have direct peer-to-peer communications between those vehicles, which I think is something else that is, we're aspiring to at some point.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think of that.
But, you're always going to have the little, kid who threw his basketball into the street and then jumps right in the middle of it. And there just happened to be, 5 construction workers immediately to the left. And
this is going to be a common occurrence.
Yeah. And your car has to choose.
And then it just comes up with a bit pop-up on the screen in front of you, and it says, push this button to change course.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Push this button to eject from the car. That's what we need. So basically, before it hits anybody, the car immediately self-destructs and launches you into the air. Everyone's safe. We solve the problem. Next topic.
All right.
Perfect. I love it. Oh, the one last thing I wanted to mention is that in the question, it sort of asks, like, what are we teaching is more valuable? And I was like, well, you don't know if the guy on the corner of the street is like the Pope or the Zodiac killer. So,
True.
I mean, there's the problem of, like, you don't know which one of these two people is the serial killer. So you just have to guess.
We need very advanced facial recognition and ultra low latency connections to the internet so that it can essentially figure out, okay, who is this person? How big of a piece of garbage are they?
Yeah.
And then when it hits it, it's like, well,
and then it displays their criminal record.
Yeah, like,
crash
well,
well, you killed 3 people, but on the plus side, they were all subscribed to cat facts.
Don't be knocking cat facts.
Oh, man.
All right.
We have another question to talk about.
Another one?
I love it.
Another whole question.
Whoa.
This question 2 this week comes to us from David. Can you make espresso without an espresso machine?
First, I guess we got to figure out what espresso is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because when I think about espresso, the first thing that I think of is just like, oh, it's the hot, like
hot bean juice.
Hot bean juice.
It is the hot bean juice, but it's like the hot,
thick bean juice.
It's like thick and gooey
viscous
and
bean
like
juice.
bitter, viscous. Yes.
Well, here's a little bit of history. Espresso was created approximately in 1903 in Italy by a guy named Luigi Bezzara. And the whole impetus for creating it was that he wanted to speed up production to be more profitable of coffee. So he wanted to make coffee faster. And he put together this machine that could do that. So espresso actually is the Italian word for fast. And what did you say it was? Cafe espresso?
Yeah, fast coffee.
Literally means fast coffee. So what's interesting that I found out, originally the word espresso didn't apply to the coffee. It was just coffee, but really concentrated coffee. But espresso referred to the machine itself.
Well, and you just said, concentrated coffee. It's interesting because the original espressos that were, brewed, it was basically this steam machine that didn't necessarily have a ton of pressure. And so it did push water through the coffee grounds faster, which is what resulted in a much faster brewing time. But it wasn't the result was not what we consider espresso in sort of modern times, or even in like the mid to late, I want to say 30s, which is kind of that, like you said, Jim, that very thick, viscous kind of concentrated coffee.
Yeah.
That the modern definition of espresso, I think, is pretty similar to what you just said. It's essentially a big puck of coffee, or actually a small puck of coffee that is blasted with a ton of pressurized water, and is able to extract coffee. I mean, the original intent was to extract it as quickly as possible so that people could just get their regular cup of coffee faster. Yeah. But now it is to extract certain qualities of the coffee that you wouldn't be able to do without that incredible amount of pressure. And so, just a spoiler, the ending here, no, you can't, you cannot make, this is a hot take, but you can't make espresso without an espresso machine.
I was talking to a couple people before recording this about this question, and the conclusion that some people were saying was that you could maybe try to MacGyver something together to work, like a piston adding pressure. And I was like, so the way to make espresso without an espresso machine would be to build an espresso machine.
Right. Well, here's some interesting stuff I found out by looking on the internet.
Ooh, I like that.
So I was looking at like what espresso was, because I really didn't know, because obviously you've made espresso deck for me that is good, and I liked it, and I watched you do the thing with the machine and then make a little hockey puck, and then it turned into a brownie, and you fed it to your brother, and it was really funny. And so the thing that I found out is that there are technical parameters set about by the Italian Espresso National Institute that allow you to make a certified Italian espresso.
Oh, wait, can I guess them?
Okay, I'm going to tell you what the parameter is, and you have to, or would you rather guess what the parameters are, and then I can tell you what the actual numbers are?
All right, well, my guess on the parameters, I think pressure is going to be basically number one. Or I feel like that's got to be in there.
Yeah, it's in there. These aren't in any specific order.
Probably the amount of beans. So
yeah.
Possibly temperature. I would say temperature is a big aspect of this. At this point, I'm just listing all of the variables that you would have under your control. And then the quantity of the shot. So the amount of the shot that is pulled.
Yeah.
Is that
you hit pretty much all of them.
What am I missing?
The only one you're missing is percolation time.
Oh, yeah. That's another good one. Okay, now let me try and. Okay, so wait, this is the industry standard, or this is what was
this? This is the Italian Espresso National Institute standard.
Oh my gosh!
So I can give you the parameter, and then you have to try to guess the number. Then, so what do you think the portion of ground coffee you have to introduce is?
Is this a single or a double shot?
I assume it's single. It doesn't say.
I guess if it was a single shot, I would guess maybe 8 or 9 grams of coffee.
Ah, interesting. This says 7 grams plus or minus half a gram.
Okay. That's fair.
Close.
Yeah.
But you're going to get a stronger shot from your version.
I mean, I base that off of the fact that most coffee shops are going to pull a 16 to 18 gram double shot.
Yeah.
But that might not be in line with the, Italian standard.
Right. We're not in Italy, so we have no oversight over here. What do you think the exit temperature from the unit is supposed to be?
Is this the temperature of the water?
Yeah, the temperature of the water.
I'm going to say like 202 Fahrenheit. So what is that in Celsius? Like 93, 94?
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's actually 88 Celsius, 190 Fahrenheit, plus or minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wait a minute.
So you're in the neighborhood.
What? Okay. All right.
You're a little hot, but that's okay.
All right. Fair enough.
All right. Next parameter is temperature in the cup.
Oh, I don't know, 20 degrees cooler than that, I guess.
what is this? So, because the answer is 153 plus or minus 5 in Fahrenheit. So that would be what, like 40 cooler?
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's about how
that's
how
67 degrees Celsius for our metric friends out there.
All one of them.
Yeah.
Well, Jim doesn't count as a friend of the show.
Here's the one that I'm interested in whether or not you hit is the entry pressure of the water.
Oh, I can tell you right now, that's got to be, I would say 8 or 9 bars.
Yeah, it's 9 bars.
Is it
plus
9
or minus
bars?
1.
Yeah, bam.
I actually did know
that is
one.
900 plus or minus 100 kilopascals or 131 plus or minus 15 psi.
Yeah.
So is 1 bar of pressure, is that the same as an atmosphere of pressure?
It's about 14 psi.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, but it's 1 atmosphere. Yeah, it's like it's at sea level roughly. But our atmosphere fluctuates so much that it's
interesting. Wow. Okay. So that's 130 pounds per square inch of pressure. That's huge.
How about percolation time? What do you think on that one?
It's got to be like 30 seconds, 32 seconds.
Yeah, 25 plus or minus 5.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of my metrics are slightly bigger because I'm American.
Yeah.
So
and also if you're used to doing doubles.
Right. I guess that's true.
Yeah. And then finally the last parameter is the volume of the final product for a single.
For a single? Okay, so
yeah. Oh, and this includes the crema, it says.
Okay. Well, if it was 7 grams of coffee, it's the ideal is usually a 1-to-2 ratio. So I guess I'll just say 14 grams of product of espresso.
Interesting, because it says it's actually should make 25 milliliters plus or minus 2.5.
Okay. All right, Italy. You may have
Wait. What did you say? You said how many? You said 14 of what?
Grams of espresso of
Yeah. I don't know how many milliliters 14 grams would be.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Quick, to my phone. Wait, I'm holding my phone.
Oh, it turns out it's exactly 25. Great.
We can move on now. No further questions.
Well, I mean, really, what I'm getting out of this information is that Italy may have invented espresso, but we clearly perfected it. And by we, I definitely mean Europe.
Yeah.
Italy's in Europe.
I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. Oh,
it's in the neighborhood somewhere.
So one suggestion that I looked up was that, and don't bite my head off yet, Dak, because I'm gonna fix it.
Are you gonna use the A word?
I am.
Oh, I don't want to hear it.
I know, but don't worry.
All right, let's go.
Fix. So some people suggest that a way that you can manually make espresso without the use of an espresso machine is with an AeroPress.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing some research, and so you said 9 bars, which is 130 psi. On average, an AeroPress produces 14 psi, which is 1 bar. So that's...
So you just need 9 AeroPresses.
You need 9 AeroPress stacked on top of each other. I also learned that on average, a human is able to punch at about 150 psi. So,
perfect!
If you could
punch your AeroPress.
So you could punch your coffee into espresso. And I also learned that most car cylinders, like standard issue, not racing cars, like sedan size cars, compress through the engine. The cylinders compress through the engine at about 175 psi, but I would not recommend putting coffee grounds into your car's engine.
Listen, that's how you make it go faster.
I mean, yeah, that's the caffeine. Plus, I mean, have you ever cooked a baked potato on your engine? You got a whole meal here.
You got a whole meal.
Yeah,
have your coffee.
I think there was an episode of Top Gear where they actually cooked a whole Thanksgiving dinner inside of a car.
I think you're totally right. Yeah. And if they didn't brew espresso in the engine chamber, then they really were missing out.
I want to tell y'all a story about my days in organic chemistry in college.
Oh, joy.
This is my favorite lab that I got to do in organic chemistry. All of them were a lot of fun, actually, but this was the one that always stood out to me. Is we took a bunch of Excedrin tablets and we did various experiments to them to synthesize caffeine. And we ended up with like a little hockey puck of caffeine that would definitely have killed you if you had tried to eat it, because it was
Nice.
enough caffeine to stop your heart. And but in the process of doing all of this, we had to create like vacuum chambers, and we had to increase the pressure so that it would suck water through this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, if you could figure out sort of the right, and this is, I guess, sort of what Derek was saying about building your own espresso machine,
Yeah.
but I was thinking you could just make an organic chemistry setup of like various beakers and vacuum chambers and what have you to, make espresso.
Yeah.
That's
that's kind of, I was thinking of ways you could jerry rig some sort of thing, and I would just picture a piston.
Yeah.
But that would be a machine designed to make espresso. So espresso machine.
Ooh, what about one of those old timey like printing presses with the hand crank, and you crank it down and it smashes down, like what they used to kill the fly?
Actually, they do have manual espresso machines that have like a basically, pull bar kind of system. I don't have any of the specs on that. I know that there are some cheaper ones that are around maybe like the $100 to $200 range that I just can't imagine can actually pull a shot that is anywhere close to 9 bars of pressure. But they also have those manual machines that, again, you're just pulling down that are $1,100, $1,200, $1,300. And if you're spending that much on a manual machine, I have to imagine that you're getting a decent product.
I would hope so.
Or else you shouldn't be spending that amount of money on it.
I don't know. Can a human being like reasonably generate 9 bars of pressure with just a little fulcrum mechanism hand crank thing, Jim?
I mean, I would think so, because if you use the right sort of mechanical advantage, like wheels and axles and screws and pulleys and what have you, I mean, you could probably eventually build up enough pressure if you had the right simple machines all daisy chained together.
Yeah, I mean, like what about like a car jack? Like, can we make espresso from a car jack?
I see no reason that you couldn't.
I bet.
But then you get into, like, if you're going through a lot of effort for something that is designed to be quick.
I think the important question is, can you fill your tires with coffee, drive around, and at the end it's espresso?
Well,
No, you couldn't, because the pressure in your cars is just
actually
about 35 psi.
Oh, that's right.
So there is this so there's a company, Nespresso, that they have the little pods and whatever, and they make basically fake espresso things.
Yeah.
Well, they have a machine. I can't remember the exact name of it, but I think it's from the Nespresso company. And those little pods, what they do is you put them in, it pressurizes some water, but then it spins the pods like a centrifuge to actually expel the water. I guess with more pressure, or for some reason, it ends up producing, I would call it kind of like a fake crema. It's mostly just like an aerosolized kind of, it's just bubbly coffee. But I can really appreciate how you gave us the very strict definition of what Italy believes espresso is. But I do kind of wonder, practically speaking, could somebody create something that would pass as espresso? And that's kind of where I took this question to heart, because there was even a coffee shop near where we all grew up that for the longest time, actually I think for its entire existence, didn't have an espresso machine and was making all of its espresso based drinks with an AeroPress, which still great coffee. AeroPress makes a tremendous cup of coffee, but it does not have the specific characteristics that espresso would have. And I think it's worth kind of defining those.
That's fair.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the biggest change here? What's the variable that's pretty much outside of all of the control of something like an AeroPress? It's got to be pressure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because as far as I understand, the AeroPress is just sort of like, it has the little smacky downy thing, but it's not like you can dial that in.
Downy, technical term.
Well, so the primary difference between aside from like the pressure, but in brewing mechanisms for something like an AeroPress, is it actually functions more like a tiny French press. as opposed to an
okay.
espresso machine. Because when you grind your beans for espresso, you have a very fine grind, but then it goes into the portafilter, which is that little metal basket, and then you tamp it down with this big metal rock, and you're quite literally pushing the grounds pretty much as close together as they'll possibly go, so that whenever you attach the portafilter to the espresso machine, it is going to produce a significant amount of pressure with regards to the water and actually shooting it through that puck of coffee. Whereas with the AeroPress, you're taking those grounds, you're putting them in the chamber, then you are putting the hot coffee into those grounds. You're actually stirring it, so there's currently no pressure happening, just atmospheric pressure, and then you're pushing it down. So it functions more, I would say, like a French press, where a majority of the brewing is actually happening under, standard pressure.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a coffee drinker, so there's that. But the thing that I know about the difference between espresso and like a coffee maker kind of brewed coffee is caffeine content. And that's about the only difference I would have been able to name if you just asked me on the street.
It's interesting. I've never really thought of it that way. Like, to me, it's about what you are able to physically extract. And I think Jim actually mentioned it earlier. A quintessential part of, a shot of espresso is the top layer, which is called crema. And that's just an emulsified oil from the beans that literally rises to the top. And that's exactly what that is. And that is highly, highly aromatic. It is, because it's a little bit gaseous, and it also provides a significant and distinct flavor in comparison to, the liquid of the espresso shot. Not as drastic as, say, having like milk foam on top. That's going to taste much differently.
Yeah.
But that, you can't extract crema under, a small amount of pressure. It's physically impossible. I think that you could get some kind of approximation, and indeed, whenever you really put a ton of force on the AeroPress, you're gonna get a little bit of like a top layer of what kind of looks like foam. It's not crema. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happening there. It's not
fake crema.
It's not chemically the same, and it's not the same extraction process. And the reason why I think espresso is so unique is because it's able to extract the solids from the ground beans in a way that normal coffee extraction processes are just simply incapable, like physically incapable of doing without that huge amount of pressure. And that's why when you have, what I would consider maybe like a really good palatable espresso, you're getting such a hugely rich flavor profile. And if you were to take those identical beans and brew them in, just a standard, pour over a drip coffee method, even if you were to reduce that down to a concentrate, you're not going to have the same, broken down solids. You're not going to have the same flavor profile overall.
Right.
And actually, I guess that would be a dumb way of doing it. An easy way of doing it is the Americano, which is a type of espresso drink, which is espresso plus water.
Plus water. Yeah, I knew that.
And so, you could do this experiment yourself where you're basically brewing the same volume of liquid by just adding hot water to a shot of espresso so that, kind of they're chemically sort of similar, or at least the best approximation that you can make. And then you taste them and they are going to taste wildly different, even though they came from the same bean.
Yeah. Interesting.
But, yeah, now I want some coffee.
I'm sure you can accommodate that for yourself.
Okay, so I guess wrapping up this particular question, is it possible to make espresso without an espresso machine? I think it is theoretically possible. I think that we could maybe rig up a car jack or something like that.
Yeah.
Basically anything that can provide a small chamber of pressure, why not? I don't know.
Right. It's like one of those, it's theoretically possible, but why would we ever do that?
Right. But I mean, on the other hand, if you're in the woods and you just need, espresso and all you have is a car jack.
I do always carry my car jacks into the woods. You are right about that.
Well, what if you run into a bear, You never know.
And he has a tire problem.
Yeah, exactly. Bear's got a flat tire on his little bear car.
All right, listeners, let us know, why are you in the woods with only a car jack? Jim, do we have any listener mail this week?
We do. And as always, if you want to send us listener mail, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com. You can comment on our blog. You can like us on Facebook. You can tweet at VaguelySci. And this email comes to us from Anne with regards to episode 90, Launching Bigfoot into the Sun.
Ooh.
And Anne writes, not naming the Parker solar probe Icarus was such a waste. I will disagree with that because I think that they deliberately chose not to do that because Icarus died.
Isn't the mission for it to fall into the sun?
Not immediately.
Okay, Jim. Okay.
Is it made out of wax? That's my only question.
It's not.
But I mean, Anne's right in that sense. But also, I think they probably chose not to do that because it might give the mission a bit of a negative connotation.
Our hubris is getting the better of us.
Yeah, like naming your boat Titanic 2.
It's a great name, though.
I was gonna name it that.
Or the Hindenburg 2, which was, I think, an episode of Lupin the Third.
It would be great if you named your boat the Hindenburg 2. It wouldn't know what to do.
It wouldn't. People would be so confused, and I'd laugh.
Weirdly enough, the boat would start flying through the air.
And then explode.
And it would hit a giant iceberg in the sky. It would be hit by a comet is what it would be hit by.
The real question is, would it try to avoid the iceberg or try to avoid the 5 buildings beside it?
Yeah. Ethics. There's ethics,
good.
Probably.
That's good.
Well, thank you very much for that email. And if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, all the places. I mean, just Google us and you'll find it. It's great. That's how podcasts work now. And subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
Do you guys have a Patreon yet?
No one likes us enough.
How do we just give you money? Where do we throw our money?
I'll just take this off of you right now.
Here's $20. Okay, yeah.
Well, our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli, and one great way you can give us money is by going to our merch store at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. Don't forget, there are ethics probably.
Yeah, it's one of the designs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you to Dak for talking about cars and coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all comedians, so that's a plug for something.
Yeah.
There you go, Seinfeld.
There you go, Seinfeld. You needed our help.
Well, thanks for having me again. Man, this is always super fun and always just vaguely scientific.
This is vaguely scientific. Yeah. Well, for vaguely scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
I guess I'm Dak.
Yeah.
All right.
To be continued, ... question mark.
Yeah. Toodaloo, everyone. I almost forgot to say that.
Do you say that every time?
I do.
Oh.
A tiny clap. A tiny clap.
Did he just say he didn't clap?
I was.
A tiny clap.
Oh.
That's what I was. It sounded like you were just like, I didn't clap.
I didn't clap. Very proud of it too. Like,
listen, I got I'm pulling all the editing strings here, so I don't even have to worry about it.